It's the 14th of January today, and I'm joined in the chamber with some colleagues and other people are appearing online. Obviously, just to remind people that this meeting will be webcast, so it's a hybrid meeting, and obviously the recording has started. Please make sure your mobile phones are off, and if you have any questions, please indicate by raising your hand. Following those announcements, the next item on the agenda is a question of declarations of interest. I have none, but I just need to check whether anybody else has anything to declare at this stage.
I can't see any, Chair.
Thank you very much. In which case we move on to the next item, which is agenda item 3, and that's the minutes of our meeting, which was held on the 22nd of November. I know that there were a number of points that were raised at a pre-briefing, but before I turn to those, does anybody have anything they want to mention as far as accuracy or anything else?
Yeah, sorry, page 6 of that particular report. It says about additional work being required by the finance team. Although the accounts were found to be correctly stated, Audit Wales have made a recommendation to the council to review the relevant policies. I just wanted to make sure that that comes back to us so that we can see what work is done. I know this is retrospective, but and it may well be coming onto the agenda, but I just wanted to make sure it is.
Thank you. I know that Hugh is with us in his capacity as Director of Finance. So Hugh, if you wouldn't mind addressing that.
Yeah, of course, no problem. So it's not on the agenda today, Councillor Clement Williams, but we will be bringing something back to future meetings around how we're addressing those recommendations for improvement from the closure of the accounts for last year. So happy to bring that.
That's just what I wanted to.
Probably not for the next meeting. It'll be more towards the end of the financial year once we.
That's fine as long as it comes back to us. Thanks.
One of the things that for officers to know we were discussing at pre-briefings was the work programme and how to populate it, and not just looking at it as between now and the end of the municipal year. It needs to be more forward planning than that. Even if we don't have any dates for the subsequent meetings, items just need to be sort of bullet pointed so we can make sure we keep track of them. So thank you, Councillor Clements. The one thing I wanted to raise was the fact that, and he's one of our lay colleagues who isn't able to join us today, but Mark Owen had raised the fact in a pre-briefing that the minutes did not fully reflect some of the conversations, because when we met in November, we had actually had quite a lengthy conversation about matters to do with risk and other things, which obviously we should be able to capture. It was a point that was raised, obviously, with Democratic Services, and if you bear with me a second, I'll just find the minute. And I had a response yesterday from one of the senior Democratic Services officers, and I'll just read it for completeness sake, if that's okay. So the question was about approval of the minutes and reflecting the topics. So the response was, across the council, the process for approval of minutes of meetings is standardised. As minutes serve as a public record of the decisions taken at a meeting, drafts are shared with officers to confirm accuracy of content in relation to reflecting officer recommendations. Members then have the opportunity during the following meeting, obviously by that we mean today, to agree or not with the accuracy of those meetings in a public forum. So it's all transparent to the public. Minutes are not a verbatim record, but a précis of the discussion with the decision as the outcome. Footage of the recorded meeting is available online, where the full content of the meeting is available to view. However, members do have the opportunity at the subsequent meeting, where the minutes are being discussed, to ask that a question be added. Where that happens, if the committee agrees, then this is added to the record of the minutes of the meeting in question retrospectively. So that was the response I received yesterday. I shared it with Mark Owen yesterday because obviously it was his points that were raised, and Mark has said that he certainly would like the minutes to reflect the points that he'd raised. So questions of discussion about risk management, assurance, and those sort of things will need to be added into the minutes. But I just wanted the committee to know that that was what Democratic Services said. I also this morning raised a point because it occurred to me that obviously the response I received was referring to the webcast footage as being part of the record. And I wanted obviously to be reassured that that record would be kept safely because if it is something that is being referred back to, and I've had a brief response to that at the start of this meeting before the recording happened. And maybe Chris Owen, you'd be able to just briefly touch on that because obviously the YouTube footage is something that the council keeps safe. Chris, I don't know if you are the appropriate person to respond to it, or it may be one of our other officer colleagues. Chris?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the footage is uploaded by our communications team, but they've confirmed that at the moment the footage is kept indefinitely on the YouTube channel. So as far as I'm aware, there is no sort of retention period around it.
Thank you. I mean, my only concern about it, it's an external provider organisation. If anything happened to whoever manages YouTube as a facility in the future, then potentially a record could be lost. But I just raised that point for completeness sake. Andrew, I can see your hand is raised.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just very quickly, and my apologies, I wasn't able to make the last meeting, but I was looking at the minutes of the last meeting, and section 12 talks about the internal audit update progress report. That's on page 9 of the pack. It talks about members asked for a fuller response in the future with regards to the letters, but it doesn't actually really say what letters. So I suppose just given, again, it's a public record, I think we might want to just sort of elaborate on what letters that would help inform the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a point which obviously I'd need to give some thought to. I don't know, Nadine, if you're able to assist in any way at this point. Page 9 of the pack, you said, Andrew.
Yeah, that's right. Page 9 is the second sentence underneath the internal audit progress report, section 12.
All right.
I'll have a little look into this and then I can add it to the minutes of the February meeting, if that's okay.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. I think it's just for the
Thank you.
readers so they understand the context, because otherwise it's a bit of a
Yeah, no
loose
problem.
sentence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And one of the officers wants to respond.
If I start, it's in relation to the responses from heads of service and directors, I think, to audit reports which had low levels of assurance. So I think it's around just one limited assurance was around having much more breadth in terms of the responses provided. So perhaps we'll link in with Louise and Nadine to update the minutes to reflect that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think the main point is that we need the minutes to more fully capture some of the conversations. I know, obviously, whilst the recording is there for people to spend many hours listening to if they so wish, it's great, but the minutes actually have to reflect the nature of the conversations that we as a Governance and Audit Committee are having, because at the end of the day, we are a key committee within the organisation, and it is about us demonstrating that we are assured that everything is being done properly. And if the minutes don't capture that flavour, then we're not demonstrating our level of commitment, nor for that matter assisting the local authority. Does anyone else want to add anything else to Councillor Clement Williams?
Yeah, just briefly, I think that Mark wanted to the minutes to include some of the stuff that he didn't think was minuted because it looked like we hadn't really scrutinised it. So just to explain why Mark wanted that information in. Thank you.
So maybe, Nadine, Democratic Services, when you're looking at the preparing the minutes for this, can just capture some of the particularly the points that Mark had raised during the meeting. So obviously he's not here today to describe them himself. So thank you. Anything else about agenda item 3? If not, we'll move on to agenda item 4, which is the forward work programme, which starts at pages 11 and 11 to 12. And Steph, as Internal Audit Manager, I believe you're going to speak to this.
Thank you, Chair. In regard to the forward programme for the next 2 meetings, we have quite a lot of content for each meeting to go through, which is a combination of updates from the wider council, internal audit updates and Audit Wales reports. We will have one addition coming through onto the February work programme. A relationship between Standards Committee and Governance and Audit Committee report is going to Standards on the 13th of January for endorsement. Once we have endorsement, that will come through to Governance and Audit for review and endorsement also. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think it's safe to say that we had acknowledgement this morning that that had actually gone to yesterday's Standards Committee. So they have approved it. I don't believe there were any amendments to it, but it will certainly be on the work programme for the 21st of February meeting. Again, in the pre-briefing, and I know I've already mentioned this point, we had agreed that we are going to try to capture all elements of work that we want added to the agenda for the future, regardless of whether or not there is a date assigned to it. And I know, for example, that one of the things that we as a committee will want to do, and obviously there's a self-assessment, draft self-assessment document later in our papers today, but we as a Governance and Audit Committee will want to carry out our own self-assessment about how effective, productive we are. So that is something, if Democratic Services can make sure, is added to the forward work programme. Thank you very much. Anybody else have any points? Councillor Clement Williams?
Yeah, so just looking at today's papers are only 86 pages. Now, we've been to some meetings where there's 200, 300 pages. There's a lot on the agenda. Is it still an hour and a half meeting, and is that long enough? Because if we're going to do it justice and audit it or scrutinise it properly, is an hour and a half long enough?
I know that normally this is about the lightest pack that we've had, certainly for a very, very long time. And it's light on number of pages because it is a special meeting. It's here for a particular set of reasons. Normally, we would expect our papers to be in the region of 200, maybe more. I know that the 86 pages, because of the Audit Wales report, actually contains more information than that, because it's got various hyperlinks which take you to 12 pages here, 20 pages there, what have you. I certainly think that we would not want to be limited as to our discussions. I know there's another meeting in this chamber, or that officers have to go to at 2:30, I think it is. So I would not want us to be saying, right, I'm sorry, but we're standing down now. So it's a very valid point. I don't know, Nolwenn or others, if you've got any comments.
I think there's been this general discussion with regards to scrutiny committees as well within the council in terms of the length of the agendas, the amount of paperwork that needs to be considered by committee members at this meeting. There's no easy solution to it, I guess. You know, there's a standard suite of reports that do need to come to governance and audit for you to gain assurances that we have the right necessary governance arrangements in place in terms of our corporate planning, our financial planning, our internal, external audit regulation, etc. So there is no easy solution to the query you raise, which is a valid point. You do want items to be given proper due consideration and due diligence, don't you, at the committee meetings. I think there's a conversation to be had outside of maybe the room in terms of, is there a need for additional meetings potentially? However, I think that's something for us to discuss as officers outside in terms of how we can best facilitate that request for allowing shorter agendas, but better discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I also know that Mark as Vice Chair and myself as Chair, we attended a Chair and Vice Chair's scrutiny forum meeting on Thursday of last week. And at that, the conversation part of the conversation did focus around the length of papers, and I think there was a potential solution being started being discussed, which is about formatting things in a way where you have a sort of an executive summary to start documents, so you can actually identify what the key issues are. It doesn't mean to say there's less information being brought to us, less information for us to scrutinise, but it is about making sure that everyone works smarter. And it's almost as if, you know, when you arrive in a courthouse, you know what you're charged with. You're not just going to sit there for 3 hours listening to a lot of things and then think, oh gosh, what are the issues, sort of thing. So work in progress, I think, at the moment. But valid point, thank you. Does anybody else have anything else they want to add under this particular agenda item? No? In which case, the next item is the Audit Wales Paper Digital by Design document, lessons from Audit Wales Digital Strategy Review across councils in Wales. It was completed in August 2024, and I know Chris Owen and Alison Lewis, Chris Owen from Neath Talbot Council and Alison Lewis from Audit Wales will want to speak to this document. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Alison, shall I bring you in first as an Audit Wales view on the paper?
Sure. Well, thank you, committee. Thank you, Chair. The report in front of members today is what we call a thematic report. So this means that it's an area where we've done a piece of local work in each of the 22 councils in Wales. And then once we've done that, we're kind of looking across the findings from the 22 then, just to really provide a national then picture around what those key findings are. So a little bit of added value. You've had your local report for Neath Talbot Council, which was generally positive, and members considered that at your meeting in January of 24. So this report is, as I say, the key findings that came out through our work. The overall finding was that while many councils recognise the role digital can play in delivering their longer term ambitions, weaknesses in their arrangements pose value for money risks. And we came to that conclusion because councils were to varying extents thinking about how they could use digital to deliver better outcomes and achieve their strategic ambitions over the longer term. However, we identified consistent weaknesses in resourcing and monitoring that pose value for money risks. So I suppose fundamentally councils did not appear to have an explicit focus on value for money or the sustainable development principle in developing their digital strategy. So again, with national work, you know, there's a little bit of generalization there because what we're trying to play back is what was the sense of our findings at a national level. And to sort of help guide councils, we identified 5 key sort of lessons for consideration, but these aren't recommendations. You have your recommendations in your local report, and for the Neath Talbot one, there was just one recommendation. And I know that Chris, as head of IT, is on that already and is setting up the mechanisms to do that. But these are really recommendations, and I know that Chris and his team will be looking at them and thinking, do they apply to Neath? Have we done that in Neath Talbot? Is there anything further that we could do? So I won't go through those 5 lessons. They're in the report for members to see. I think what I would pull out, though, is that we use some practice examples against each of those 5 to try and show what others are doing that may be something that would be useful for other councils to think about. And it's really pleasing to tell the Governance and Audit Committee today that Neath Talbot Council was used on 3 occasions in those practice examples as things that we thought was practice to bring to the attention of others. So I think just to highlight those 3 occasions, was one related to the work that Neath Talbot Council was doing in terms of understanding its current position on digital. The second one was about it having an integrated digital strategy, which was really positive. and the fact that it was investing in the digital capacity and capability. So I say, I think, you know, it's pleasing. It must be pleasing for Chris and his team to be cited in that report for those practice examples. So the request in front of members today is just that you note the national report. It's brought to you for your attention and information. I'm happy to take any questions that the committee might have. Maybe perhaps Chris could speak first, and then any questions either Chris or I will take depending on their relevance to either of us. If you're happy with that, Chair, I'll pass over to Chris.
Thank you very much, Alison. Sensible suggestion. So yes, please, Chris.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Alison, for the précis. There's not a huge amount I can add to what Alison's just outlined to members. As Alison mentioned, in terms of the Neath Talbot specific review that we undertook, just to sort of re-underline, there was only one recommendation that came out through the Audit Wales work in Neath Talbot. That recommendation was around how we needed to state a timeline around our approach to delivering the digital data and technology strategy. And at the time, officers were very much still in the process of developing the new delivery plan for Neath Talbot to underpin the DDAT strategy, which we just developed. So it was more of a timing issue rather than anything else. And from my perspective and from my team's perspective, we're now very confident we have robust programme delivery arrangements in place to actually meet the objectives that were stated within that recommendation. And indeed, we presented back to Cabinet on the 24th of July of last year our annual report and review of the digital data and technology strategy with the projects that we delivered, the impact that they had, the benefits that they were bringing, and also our forward plan for delivery for the next year. So, as I say, we're very confident that we've now got those processes and procedures in place to meet the recommendation that had come out of the Neath Talbot review. And also just to again underline, because it'd be remiss of me not to do so, you know, the achievement that Neath Talbot is acknowledged in 3 of the 5 practice recommendations in the Audit Wales report. So, you know, that's great feedback for the team. They should take huge pride in the fact that the work that they're undertaking is being held up as exemplars across Wales. So I'll leave it at that, Chair, if that's okay, and I'll hand back to you.
Thank you. And yes, it is a great testament to you and your team, Chris, when 3 examples are given and 5 examples are given and 3 of them relate to the work of you and your colleagues. It's very pleasing. I suppose one question from me is timeframes. When do you expect recommendations to be able to be reported back to us? I know that we hear from you not every meeting, but periodically. So when do you expect progress to have been either made or eventually completed?
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of the considerations that Audit Wales has put forward, obviously we're cited in 3 of them. So we're confident across those 3 that we're meeting what Audit Wales has set out. In terms of the other 2 considerations that have come through, they're very much around our delivery arrangements, which again are now baked into the way we're delivering the digital data and technology strategy. So I'm confident that there isn't any aspects of the report that we need to report back on because we're already delivering on those pieces. Our next formal report will be again in July of this year when we do this year's progress update on the digital data and technology strategy. So again, what we'll try and do is tease out to that the specific alignment back to the considerations so that you can clearly see how we've met them and are continuing to deliver on them going forwards.
Thank you very much. And I suppose, obviously, Alison, Audit Wales is speaking with the other 21 councils in Wales. Various points will come out of those conversations. I don't know if anything's been identified so far, but again, when's Audit Wales likely to be able to give us a fuller picture about developments?
We don't share the national report. It doesn't have recommendations in it. It is a sort of a sharing of our sort of findings. The individual councils have their own reports with their own recommendations. And that's a matter for those councils to deal with the recommendations from us the same way as Neath Talbot deals with recommendations that we give to them.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, it was just, I've reflected on something one of the my team commented on yesterday about concerns about AI. I'm just wondering if maybe at a later date, when we could have a little bit of information as councillors as to what kind of AI we're talking about, because AI covers, different things, and I don't know if we all understand what kinds of things we're talking about here. We say AI, but what does that mean? So I was just wondering if we could have some information as councillors. I've seen some of it working, but just to understand when we're talking about AI, that we know exactly what we're talking about.
Thank you. And obviously there was a lot in the public domain yesterday with the Prime Minister giving a specific briefing about artificial intelligence, but I know it's something Nolwenn will want to speak about now.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Clement-Williams. I think last year Chris Owen did hold a member seminar where he articulated what was being delivered within the DDAT strategy. And I'm sure we will be able to look at something similar for all elected members once again with regards to, progress being made and maybe new emerging solutions, although AI has been around for a little while now, but we are gaining quite a bit of traction within the local authority through the work that Chris and his team are doing to see where we can embed the use of artificial intelligence. And there are some live case studies that we've got now that in due course we can maybe bring to the attention of members for you to appreciate the work that is being undertaken by Chris and his team, but also the potential that has over the coming years to transform the way we certainly deliver and undertake some of our maybe back office functions as well. Yeah.
Sorry, it was a bit remiss of me as well as I'm speaking to say it is nice to know that 3 of the 5 examples are coming from Neath Talbot. And I do believe in thanking staff for hard work and good work. So I'd like to ask Chris if he can pass our comment on to the staff to say that we're quite proud of that. Thank you.
And just for completeness sake, DDAT is an acronym. I know it's in the papers, but it's Digital Data and Technology Strategy, just for everybody who's not sure about that. So, but thank you. And obviously we'll see developments as they unfold over time. And Chris, we look forward to hearing from you again in July. So thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Thank you.
Yeah.
This report obviously was for information. Does anyone else have any comments before we formally note the report? No, in which case we note the report and move on to the next agenda item, which is the biggest part of our papers this afternoon, and that's the self-assessment 2023-2024 report. The report starts at pages 47 to 86. And we obviously need the report to be introduced, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, before you have the self-assessment for 2023-2024 for Neath Talbot Council. Under the Local Government and Elections Act 2021, there was a requirement for every local authority in Wales to undertake a self-assessment, and in line with that requirement, there's also a requirement for the document to come before yourselves as Governance and Audit Committee to review and provide recommendations to us as officers prior to it being approved at Cabinet. And this particular self-assessment will be going before our Cabinet on February the 5th. This is the 3rd iteration of the self-assessment piece of work. The first year was 2021-2022, and this clearly is the 3rd year of 23-24. There was guidance issued by Welsh Government with regards to, the potential approach to undertaking a self-assessment. It's fair to say each authorities had to work their way through how they go about undertaking the self-assessment. So some local authorities have joined it in with their annual reporting. So you get one report, you get the annual report and self-assessment as one document. Neath Talbot haven't yet decided to go down that route, but that will certainly be something for discussion in due course. It's an evolving and learning process that we're undertaking here, and we're always looking at ways in which we can strengthen our approach to the way we undertake the self-assessment. There are 3 key questions that we have to consider when undertaking the self-assessment, and it's the extent to which we as a local authority are exercising our functions effectively. So how well are we doing? How are we using our resources economically, efficiently and effectively? So how do we know? And then it's the governance that wraps around those 2 bullet points. Like I said, I think if you look at page 60 of your pack, you will see a dashboard that summarises the kind of key areas that are looked at and considered when we undertake the self-assessment, and then the overall assessment of where we believe we are as a local authority. So we continue to believe we are mature, however, and moving towards leading in some of the areas. And I think the work we intend to undertake over the course of the next few months, as we look to prepare for the self-assessment for 24-25, will hopefully demonstrate that we are being open, honest and transparent in the way that we undertake this piece of work. In terms of yourselves as Governance and Audit Committee, you have a key role obviously to play, as I said at the start, to review the document and to provide us with any recommendations that we can take forward prior to its approval at Cabinet on February the 5th. Happy to take any questions. Diolch, Cadeirydd. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Obviously, because I, as Chair, and Marco in as Vice Chair, had a briefing with officers at the end of last week, we then, as a committee, had a pre-briefing, and today, obviously, we're discussing it again. So I've had an opportunity now to look at this document on a number of occasions, obviously seen the previous self-assessment documents. When we first started having conversations about it, I suppose our first question of officers was, is there a template? And the answer was no, there isn't. You can do your own thing. Then there were some comments about the fact that whilst it is a very sort of discursive document, it's not necessarily the easiest thing to read, purely and simply because it's set out more in a sort of newsletter, newspapery sort of format, which isn't a negative, but it's about how you make the document something that isn't just something that sits on the shelf and is never picked up. And we have offered our services to act as a sort of critical friend, purely and simply just to say that may not work for us. It may be easier if we did it or you did it differently. I suppose the one thing that's particularly annoying, other than my phone buzzing in the background, apologies, folks, is the one thing is the phrases like mature and that sort of thing. It's about people understanding what that actually means. So it is a document. I'm sure, will certainly approve it today. It will obviously go to Cabinet, but certainly my understanding is that the next version of it, the 4th iteration, is likely to come back to us in the summer. And between now and then, we're very happy to sort of give more detailed comments to people. So does anyone want to add anything? Councillor? Yes, no.
I could just come in, Chair, on the comments you've made there, which are gratefully appreciated. With the way these documents are presented, sometimes it's a balance, isn't it, between it being sort of user-friendly to a certain extent, so anybody could pick it up and it's sort of reader, user-friendly, and then ensuring that the content is put across in a way that allows us to be held to account for what we state within the report. You are right, there is no template. Each authority is allowed to do its own thing in that regard. I think you're perfectly, valid point around understanding some of the terminology that's used. We often fall into this trap of making assumptions that people just know what we mean when we say we're mature or leading. So there's room for us to go off and kind of clarify that, I guess, in terms of how we put the document together. The other point I'd like to make, Chair, and it has been due to capacity within the team, Louise McAndrew. This is just one of several kind of annual reports or quarterly reports that she has had to produce. We have added a little capacity into that team now. So my aim is that we bring these annual reports, which this is, to you on a far more timely manner. For me, ideally, we would be bringing this forward, towards the end of the summer, early September at the latest. That's purely down to capacity within the team, which we have strengthened. And there is something else as well in terms of looking to see how we streamline the production of this document with our annual report, with the annual governance statement. There's a lot of requests going out for information and data. So there's, again, a piece of work for us to streamline that. And that hopefully will strengthen the content we get as well, Chair. Diolch.
I think the other point is obviously that any document like this, it's fine if you're reading it on a laptop with a reasonably large screen. If you're trying to read it from an iPad or anything else, and for example, a lot of people these days would only ever look at things on mobile phones, for example, it then gets to be incredibly difficult to read across the columns and that sort of things. Any comments from colleagues? Councillor Clement-Williams?
Sorry, Scarborough show, isn't it? Yeah, it's page 14 of this report. If you're on the iPad, it's is it 64? Under the heading Leadership and Management, with people climbing up a rock, it's the easiest way to find it on an iPad. It says the annual performance appraisal scheme requires every manager from the chief executive downwards to have regular performance discussions. I think that regular to one person might be different to what regular means to another person. When I was managing my staff, I met every one of them once a month. There isn't, regular could be, oh yeah, I meet them regular, I meet them every 4 months, should that be time specific? Because I think it should be. And how do we know that as you go down the ladder, a lot of our staff don't have access to terminals on a regular basis, they're satellite workers. How do we know that these conversations are happening with our staff on the ground? They're busy doing the day job. How do we know that these conversations are taking place?
Thank you, Councillor Clement-Williams, for that question. I do feel there's work to do to strengthen our appraisal process in that respect. I've had early sight of the staff survey that was undertaken last year, and I think the percentage of staff who believe or feel that they've had an appraisal is not as high as we would have expected, and that will be a report that'll be coming before members in due course. It hasn't yet been considered at the strategic leadership team. I think as far as an appraisal goes, I, for example, would hold kind of two appraisals with my management team. So I'd have an end of year appraisal, if you like, and then a half year appraisal as well. That's kind of a formalised approach. But I do then have regular one-to-one meetings with my management team. And you are right, each manager will take a slightly different approach. It's easier for me to do that with a small management team that I have, but there'll be some managers in this authority that have large teams, so it's more of a challenge with them. So I think, in relation to your question, how do we know whether that's happening? I think, again, like I said, the results of the staff survey are interesting. So I do think there's more work for us to get underneath the skin of that one to understand exactly what's happening in all parts of the authority. And that's in relation to kind of office-based staff, but also those staff that maybe aren't in the office and are more frontline staff as well. Clearly, there's a different approach taken in social services with regards to the way they do their supervisions. So they have regular supervisions, which means they're looking at their caseloads as well with regards to not just the personal development side of it. So accept the question. Like I said, this is what we do in terms of looking for areas for improvement, and that is potentially one of them. Diolch.
I've got another question, but I'd love to sit down and talk to you about that. I had 23, I think was the most staff I had at any one time. And it is difficult, but it is so worth it, investing that time with your staff, because that's where you hear about what their day-to-day problems are, if there's a problem within the team, if there's a problem with the work, because they won't come up to you and tell you, but if you actually ask them, what are your blockers, you know, how can I do anything for you, that's how you get that feedback from those staff, and they feel more valued, and you can head off problems before they hit. And I do believe it's one of the most important tools a manager has when they're managing staff. Is it okay for my other question, Chair? Sorry.
Absolutely.
Last one, you'd be glad to know. Oh, it was that question about, was that date right, Chair? It's page...
Yes, you
68. Yeah,
said it was
it
previous
says
year's date.
it will be approved by members in the summer of 2024. But we are now in, I know it's a retrospective report, we are now in, it's, I don't know what page, is it 68? This is confusing. Yeah, 68 and 69. So should it be, is that the correct date? And that's fine. Or should that be 2025?
So the procurement strategy was approved in the summer of 2024. I think this is the issue we have, I guess, with the timeliness of when these come before you as committees, isn't it? Because this is based on the position we found ourselves in 23-24. So that was a correct statement we made then. It has obviously been approved, and it was approved back in the summer of 2024. So the date is correct, but I get the point you're trying to make.
Yeah, that's fine. That's all I wanted to know, really, is had it been approved on, or was it coming up? Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any comments? I can see that our colleague Mike Spanner has raised his hand. Mike is joining us as a lay member. Mike has been approved for appointment as a lay member, but is going through his induction. So he's here as an observer today, but I've given him permission to speak because he is a very valued colleague, future colleague, but he's also somebody who has a lot of experience in this area, and it would be helpful to have his external view of this document. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. So, excuse me, I just want to share my personal perspective initially. So I like the layout and the navigation through the document, I have to say, but I take Chair's point in terms of, particularly if you're going to access it via mobile, it could be more difficult. I don't have a background with Neath for Talbot, so I can't sort of support or challenge the detail behind some of the statements, but I had a couple of observations to share if I can, and perhaps a question at the end. So on page 59 of my pack, I think it's slide number 9 of yours, under the heading Summary of Performance 23-24. I got wrapped up in the maths, I suppose. But in the left-hand column, it talks about 63 aims, 42 are on track, and 3 are off track. And I was just wondering what happens to all the others in that case. So are they completed? And then you've got another analysis on the right-hand side, which talks about more work to do. But I was unclear. More work to do feels like potentially off track to me as well. So I'm just sharing as a, you know, as an open readership comment, that wasn't particularly clear to me. Turnover leaf then for me, page 60, your dashboard. So again, I like the concept. I really like the ease of understanding that. My other comment, though, is where you get behind it and you look at each of these, the detail or the narrative and the detail for each of these elements. I didn't necessarily find the narrative to be compelling to support the change in moving that dial effectively. Why was it rated better? Or even in the case of risk management, why have you gone down in your assessment? I know you talk about improvements that happen, but I don't think it's got worse year on year necessarily. So That would be helpful if that was clearer to me as a reader. And my general question, I suppose, was flip into the improvement action plan at the end. I know you talked about producing the whole self-assessment and bringing it into the Governance and Audit Committee in a more timely manner in future, but will there be interim reporting of progress against the individual actions? Because it'd be good to see that progress as we lead up to it, and not just have a one hit and then park it for 12 months and then look at it again.
I'll pick up the last 2 points you made, and I'll hand over to Louise to clarify the percentages and the numbers, etc. on that first comment. Megan, nice to meet you as well, and welcome to the committee. I think, yeah, in terms of the point you made around the dashboards, etc., and we had quite a robust conversation at our strategic leadership team with regards to how do we determine where we sit on that kind of dial, if you like. And that's a piece of work that we do need to kind of improve upon and strengthen, because there's an element of subjectivity around this. I mean, we make a subjective call as to where we believe we are. That is based, however, on the evidence that we have to back up that we believe we are in mature. So it'll come down to maybe the governance ranges we have, the strategy we have in place, the action plans, the delivery plans that we have in place to drive certain elements of these forward, and in terms of some of the actions that have been undertaken since the previous year to improve matters. So there is evidence behind that subjectivity, if you like, but ultimately it's the call of the lead officers to where they believe they are. I think the piece of work that we need to do to strengthen our approach is to allow that to be open to greater challenge from the directors across the authority. I think it's something we can be looking at in terms of for the 24-25 iteration of the self-assessment will be to hold individual workshops with each of the directorates out there, so they have an opportunity to maybe challenge the understanding and belief that the lead officers have in those areas against what they actually see on the ground. So, take your point on board around those dashboards. Louise, do you want to come in on the first point, please?
Nice to meet you, Mike. I'm Louise McAndrew. So in terms of our corporate plan, you may have noticed that we've moved from a 22-27 version, and now we're in a 24-27 version. So continuing through those, the corporate plan are 3-year, well, they were 5-year aims initially. So we are carrying through those aims through the corporate plan as a way to meet our wellbeing objectives. So that's what those aims refer to. So apologies if you've got confused. We've got then strategic priorities then that sit underneath the aims. So I appreciate perhaps it hasn't been explained as best as possibly can, but we want to make sure that we have a mechanism for when we get to 2027 that we are able to look back over the course of the 5-year period, and we are doing that through our sort of medium-term aims then. And then once underneath the aims, we've got our strategic priorities and our performance measures then. So that is what's on the right-hand side of the page for you. So I hope that covers it.
Sort of, but could just to satisfy my curiosity, just to understand the maths really, just talk about aims and don't worry about the strategic priorities. But it says there's 63 aims, 42 are on track and 3 are off track.
Yes, yeah. So, and then obviously there we've got those ones where there's more to do. So we were looking at that over a year period, whereas a lot of our priorities are going to be over 3 or 4 years then. So that's where the missing percentages of those ones that there is more to do. But again, coming back to the chair's point around the definitions, I think that is something that we need to sort of take on board, and we need to be far more clearer about the off track, more to do on track. Does that help? There we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Noel. When you wanted to add something?
Coming back to the final point you made then about the improvement actions in terms of you getting an update. So clearly this was 23-24, so the improvement actions you see there will have been embedded into this year's 24-25 service delivery plans within predominantly my directorate. So progress on them comes via then the performance monitoring that goes to scrutiny committees. this as a self-assessment document, because at the end of the day, your role is to satisfy yourselves or give yourselves assurance that we are undertaking these pieces of work. So in terms of monitoring the ongoing delivery, that as scrutinise that, our scrutiny committees within the Neath Talbot Council. So we don't intend on bringing anything back on a more regular basis to update you on where we are, but I can give you an assurance that we do have the mechanisms in place where that is monitored in terms of our service delivery plans. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I can see, Andrew, your hand is raised.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And apologies, I might be building on some of the things we've talked about. I suppose my focus is on the improvement action plan. And I know most of them there are in the progress to date as categorised as ongoing. So for me, there's ongoing and a not yet due, and there's ongoing as also ongoing but well overdue. I suppose I was looking at page 84. It's under Q3 SA20. It talks about developing a medium-term financial strategy. It fell out of the 21-22 self-assessment and it's gotten achieved by March 23. Can I just check, is that March 23 and it's ongoing and well overdue, or is that March 23 should be March 25, which aligns with the rest of the dates in the document? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense, and it's your first point. It was due by March 23, but it's well overdue due to the lack of any sort of forward planning information that the Welsh Government can provide. So that's now gone to March 25. But in terms of this document, originally it was March 23, but very much work in progress still.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. And of course, I'd forgotten that there were external contributors to some of the things as well. So that's a very valid point, Hugh. I mean, I suppose, Nolwenn, obviously we've made a number of comments, and we wouldn't want dozens of footnotes all over the document, peppering it, saying, to give an explanation for each of the dates, for example. But genuinely, as a committee, we would be very happy to add a critical voice to the document in the future. And I know I do want to thank Louise for the work that she's done, because obviously pulling a lot of documents together at any one time is very complicated, and this isn't the easiest of tasks, particularly when you're completing something which you're having to look at almost distant memories in a way to capture things. So thank you, Louise, for the work you've done. Anybody else want to add any points to the discussion? Obviously, the recommendations are on page 49 into page 50. We've made a number of comments, Nolwenn. I don't know whether, given the document's going to go to Cabinet in the fairly near future, I don't know if you're going to be intending to capture any of those or to report to Cabinet our discussions, because we're not making specific, you have to change this sentence comments. I'm just wondering what you're going to do with it.
Thank you, Chair. So we will certainly reference in the cover sheet that goes alongside this self-assessment document when it goes to Cabinet that clearly you have discussed it in length here, and I've certainly provided us with the opportunity to play a constructive role in strengthening and improving the approach we take, which we welcome. We welcome, Chair. So you're right. You haven't asked us to make any materialistic changes to the self-assessment document itself. I think the points that you have raised, we'll capture those and we'll put them as part of the cover sheet so that Cabinet members can see that you've reviewed, you've provided some suggestions, you've offered to support in terms of providing that kind of constructive challenge with regards to the approach taken. We'll certainly note those within the cover sheet, so our Cabinet members are fully cited on the contribution you've made towards this process and this document. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So does anybody else want to add anything, either any officers or colleagues? In which case, obviously, this document is for noting, and we're assured that the Cabinet will have our views when they consider it. And we look forward to the fourth iteration coming back whenever the fourth iteration is added to the work programme. And again, taking Councillor Clement Williams' comments on board about lengths of papers and things. I mean, this is quite a lengthy document, and whether the next document is going to be as long or shorter, I don't know. But anyway, thank you everybody for looking at it. The last item of the agenda is urgent items, and unless I'm mistaken, there are no urgent items.
No urgent items, Chair.
There we are. Thank you all very much. Thank you for joining us for the first meeting of the Governance and Audit Committee in 2025. I look forward to seeing you all soon, and certainly looking forward to our new lay member joining us in a full capacity in February. I should note, officers, that we are planning training. We need to factor that into our conversations as well. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks all.